So the bigger the fear of judgment, the probably the closer you are to engaging in something that will bring you great joy because you're afraid of doing it wrong, or you're afraid of hurting somebody, or you're afraid of failure.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mind My Age, the podcast where we explore the journeys and wisdom behind healthier, more fulfilling aging. I'm your host, Neelam Brar, and today we're diving into the topic that's close to many of our hearts: how to capture all the amazing experiences that we've accumulated throughout our lives and share them as a captivating story for future generations. Whether you're thinking of writing a memoir or simply wanting to pass on your wisdom, today's guest here to guide us throughout that process. Please welcome Kate Brenton, a published author, podcaster, and educator who specializes in helping people bring their brilliance and wisdom into the world through storytelling. Kate, you're known for helping people ignite their intentions and bring their stories to life. For our listeners who have lived rich, full lives but might feel unsure about how to start capturing those experiences in a memoir or otherwise, what's the first step?
The first step is deciding that your story is worth telling. A lot of times when people start writing, they feel like they'll compare outside of themselves or think it's not really that big of a deal. But if you understand why you're writing, then that's a value enough. So if you're writing it for yourself, journal, some people start to journal or write letters to their children so that they can open them later. It's a brilliant way to pass your wisdom on, a keepsake for them to open. If you're wondering about a memoir, I tell people, like in the book that I wrote, I asked people about the fulcrum moment and what they learned, and then build the story from there. And a lot of times those moments, like your brightest moments right before them, are the ones that you had the most doubt. And traversing the doubt and sharing what you've earned as wisdom is the natural arc of every story. It's the natural arc of all the major movies: being confused or lost, finding a moment of courage, and then creating resolution. And so if you just remember that your story is as epic as what people go to the movie theaters to see, because it's a human story, then that's really the place to start.
I recently was reading a quote about, you can't celebrate or even appreciate the highs without experiencing the lows. And so they go together hand in hand. And if you can pull that into a story, it's so valuable.
Totally.
So many of our listeners might be thinking, who wants to read my life? How can they overcome that self doubt and see the value in their own story?
It goes back to the first thing. The first thing you have to do is decide your story is worth reading, because if you don't think it's worth reading, then you're going to choose language and your hesitancy is going to come across in your voice. And a lot of times when we start, our mind will jump to the finished product. That is the second thing. Don't jump to the finished product. There's writing to capture the idea. That's one style of writing. That's where you start. And then there's refinement. If your mind starts to say, how's that going to fit into a book? Or am I writing enough? Just tell yourself that's for the refinement phase. That's not the phase I'm in right now. Right now, I'm just going to make my cup of coffee or my tea or sit down in the afternoon in my favorite spot. One I one quick tip is that we acclimate quickly to an environment. So if you decide to write something, create a space in your home. And if you're in a smaller living space now, then bring fresh flowers to your kitchen table and set your kitchen table out. And this is my writing space. If you honor it with a candle or a little bit of flowers, you're telling your inner muse, I'm ready and I'm going to share my story. And it's not finding value that somebody else has, which is very common today, but it's mining within and bringing that out to the world.
What do you think is a great way to approach the idea of writing a memoir with mom and dad?
I think recording them talking and getting them into a space of ease would be the best way for the questions to come out. If you give them presence, what a story wants is presence. A book can't be read if you don't open it. Movies make a lot of money from the emotional journey that the audience goes on. So if you want them to open up, you're going to have to decide to make the time to be with them. So make a moment to be with them, because they'll drop a story And something in you is going to light up and lean in, and they're going to go, "Oh no, that story." And you're going to go, "Yeah, I want to hear about that story." And don't be afraid to ask them specific questions. I actually did this with my own grandparents, and I would ask them, "What were you eating? Where did you go to lunch? What were you wearing?" And they'd be like, "Katie," because they would call me Katie. "Why are you asking these questions?" But I learned, I did it on intuition, if I'm completely honest. But what I learned from following those questions is if you ask them detailed sense questions, eating, dancing, place, it activates a part of their memory and the stories start to flow.
It's so interesting because I've been more intentional about having these conversations with dad more than mom lately, but like the emotional side of his stories, like you can just see his eyes well up sometimes when he's telling them to me. And they just create such a firm imprint on my soul when he tells them to me that I've been thinking more and more about how do I get more out of him and record them this time so that other generations can see these too.
I would just take my grandmother to lunch and I would ask her all kinds of questions. I would even ask her questions about my grandfather passing. And because I've always asked questions, I just started the consistency of the asking. Once a repertoire was set up, what you're gifting them is that their stories are worth it. So when you're listening and you're giving them intention and they know that you're so busy of so many other things to do, soul to soul, I'm so glad you used that word, soul to soul recognizes that. And there's wisdom embedded in them that's waiting. Like our journey turns, right? When we're born, everyone's about us. And I mean that lovingly. Then we rise up and we're learning and we're doing. And all of a sudden something shifts and you shift to giving back to the world. And some parents might feel like I provided and I just did the best I can. But right below that statement is, I guarantee you, are at least three amazing stories that would blow your mind at what your parent or an elder you're inspired by is waiting to gift to someone because they might not even consciously know, but they're waiting.
Many people struggle with the fear of being judged or misunderstood when they share their personal stories. I can personally reflect and say, like, when I thought about even starting this podcast, putting my name out there, I was really apprehensive because I was worried about saying the wrong thing or being judged. And ultimately, I'm enjoying this more than I've enjoyed anything I've done. And so, what are your advice or tips for people to move past that fear and bring their authentic selves to the writing?
I think you already shined the light on the key. The judgment is the indicator of what's on the other side. So the bigger the fear of judgment, the probably the closer you are to engaging in something that will bring you great joy because you're afraid of doing it wrong, or you're afraid of hurting somebody, or you're afraid of failure, which we all are. All those things are basic human fears. So I would love to tell you that judgment won't happen, but we all know it will because it will. And so you toughen up your skin a little bit and you do not let judgment be an indicator of the rightness of what you're doing. You let that feeling inside of either, I don't, a lot of times I'll have clients and they'll be like, I don't really know why I'm doing this. I'm like, that's the perfect reason because that means something inside of you is moving you forward and it's not your logical brain. And here we go, because you're trusting a non logical, non quantifiable reason to start a project. And that means something really beautiful is coming for you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. For our listeners, if you're ready to capture your life's experiences and share your story into the world, stay tuned to Mind My Age for more inspiring conversations. And please remember, your best years are still ahead. Thank you for joining us on Mind My Age. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite platform and visit totalife.com for more resources and support. Until next time, stay mindful, stay healthy, and keep thriving.